Hello, my name is Nicholas Cohen. I'm a primary care doctor with a practice in downtown San Francisco. I created HealthScore. HealthScore is a comprehensive program to optimize health and extend life. In my over 10 years of practice, I've been able to help improve the health and support increased lifespan for thousands of patients. Now, HealthScore is available to the general public, to anyone who wants to optimize their health and extend their life. HealthScore is based on 31 recommendations in 4 domains: psychological health, sleep and activity, nutrition, and your numbers or biometrics. These 31 recommendations have been identified in the peer-reviewed medical literature in the last 10 years and are the most important contributors to health and longevity. Today, in the domain of sleep and activity, we're discussing the recommendation for sleep. Recommendation number 10, sleep at least 7 hours every night. Let's start with the definition. The recommendation is to sleep at least 7 hours every night. The definition of sleeping 7 hours means even on weekends and with the same bedtime every night. I'm also implying that you're avoiding regular use of habit-forming sleep medication like Ambien or Lunesta, because these may independently increase risk of mortality and likely shortchange you on many of the benefits of natural restorative sleep. The goal is, first of all, to sleep for 7 hours every night, and to do this each and every night. We're not talking about 49 hours averaged over the week, where you don't sleep at all during the week but make up for it on the weekends. We're talking about 7 hours each night. So catching up on the weekends is not as good as consistently sleeping 7 hours every night when it comes to your health. This also means sleeping 7 hours at night in one solid block, not over the whole course of the day. In other words, those 7 hours in one block are more beneficial than a 2-hour nap during the day and then 5 hours at night. So what's the evidence that 7 hours or more a night actually benefits your health, much less extends your life? Here's the evidence showing the connection between sleep duration and risk of death. This is the study. It's available in PDF format in the resources section of this lecture. This study was published in the journal Sleep. It was a systematic review and meta-analysis published in February 2010. Over 1 million adults were included in the review, and the follow-up period for the studies included was between 4 and 25 years. The outcome of interest was, does sleeping less than 7 hours each night increase risk of death? And the investigators found that indeed, during the follow-up period, people who slept less than 7 hours each night had a 12% increased risk of dying during the follow-up period compared to those who slept 7 to 9 hours a night. You can see that in the graph where compared to someone sleeping less than 7 hours, there was a 12% decrease in mortality when you slept 7 to 9 hours. But how exactly does not sleeping enough cause death or poor health? Here's the mechanism. When we don't sleep enough, essentially our bodies go into a fight or flight mode. Our bodies just think if you're not sleeping, there must be an emergency, and they act accordingly. They produce a response in your body, which is fine if you're being chased by a bear, but isn't good to have turned on chronically. So what happens is insufficient sleep increases our risk of obesity via changes in leptin and ghrelin. These are hormones that increase appetite and reduce energy expenditure. It makes sense that if we're in an emergency mode, we want to store up calories to prepare for a famine. So we're going to be eating more, we're not going to feel satiety, and we're going to decrease our metabolism so we don't burn as much energy. Insufficient sleep also causes a cardiovascular response. It causes abnormalities in lipid composition, which contribute to accumulation of plaques in the coronary arteries. It also leads to high blood pressure. During the fight or flight response, our stress hormones are pumping out. That's cortisol, for example. Cortisol raises our blood pressure. It's great that we have high blood pressure if there's an emergency. It helps us send blood to our organs that need it for running. But it's not good to have chronically elevated high blood pressure. It also causes insulin resistance and diabetes. This is because when we are in a fight or flight mode, we flood our bloodstream with blood sugar. So we have glucose for energy for fighting. That chronically elevated blood sugar leads to chronically elevated insulin, which it responds to high blood sugar. But when we have chronically high insulin, eventually our cells become numb to the signal. So they become resistant to insulin. And that's the definition of diabetes. And finally, there's chronic inflammation. And chronic inflammation may lead to increased risk of cancer. Okay, I've told you all the scary stuff about what sleep deprivation does, but there is hope. Now that I've told you all the scary things about what sleep deprivation does to your body and your health, I want to assure you that there's hope. These are 11 tips that have been tested for years with my patients and by myself, and they will significantly improve the quality of your sleep. Tip number 1, go to sleep at the same time every night, even on weekends. Having a consistent bedtime is independently valuable, even if you're getting 7 hours of sleep. So if you're getting 7 hours of sleep, but your bedtime varies all the time, that's not as good as having a consistent bedtime. The reason? It's because we have a circadian rhythm, an internal clock. That circadian rhythm, when it's synchronized with the clock on the wall, the chronologic time, we get optimally restorative sleep. When we change the time we go to sleep, the circadian rhythm has to recalibrate and adjust to the new time. And that can take 2 to 3 days. And if the circadian rhythm is not calibrated with the chronologic clock on the wall, you get less than restorative sleep. What that means for people who change their bedtime on the weekend is that going into the week, they have 2 to 3 days of non-restorative sleep because they've changed their bedtime. And then going back into the week, they have 2 to 3 more days of non-restorative sleep because they've changed their bedtime again. You can see that having a different bedtime on the weekend actually can mess up 6 out of 7 of your days of the week of sleep. The goal then is to not be in chronic catch-up mode where your circadian rhythm is constantly having to readjust to your bedtime. For me, a consistent bedtime is 10 p.m., but it's really up to you. The important thing is not the time exactly, but the consistency that you go to bed at that time. And tip number 2, limit naps. The next recommendation is to limit naps. Oftentimes, if you don't sleep enough, you'll have the tendency to nap during the day. This will deprive you of the ability to resume a normal sleep schedule because you won't be tired the next night. That's called our sleep drive, and it's primarily due to buildup of adenosine in the brain. If you take a nap, you siphon off some of that adenosine, so you don't have as strong a sleep drive when you're trying to go to bed at night. Also, it's been shown that sleep architecture requires the 7th hour of sleep, that last hour, for memory consolidation and learning. So if you're breaking up your sleep into a nap and then less than 7 hours at night, you're never getting that 7th hour of continuous sleep that's so important for cognitive function. Tip number 3 is to avoid caffeine 6 hours before sleep. This is an average. Some people are more sensitive to caffeine, and if they have any caffeine after lunch, they're going to be wired and unable to go to bed. But a general average is 6 hours before sleep. That, however, could be different for you. So you want to experiment with changing the time you have your last caffeine. Next tip number 4, is avoid exercise 4 hours before sleep. Now, this exercise recommendation needs to be unpacked a bit. First of all, exercising regularly during the day actually improves sleep quality and the ability to get a good night's rest. It's this exercise that happens right before bedtime that is potentially a problem. There are activities you can do close to bedtime that count as exercise but are not stimulating. For example, yoga or taking a walk. These can actually help you relax. We're talking about exercise that's particularly stimulating. And you can tell the difference if you miss a night of exercise and you're more tired or less tired. But stimulating exercise should be avoided within 4 hours of sleep. Tip number 5, avoid alcohol 3 hours before sleep. Now, alcohol, a lot of people think, is a soporific or a sleep-inducing chemical, and it will help you fall asleep. So it does help you fall asleep, alcohol. The problem is that alcohol gets metabolized, and when it's no longer in your system, which will happen about the middle of the night, you can have a mini withdrawal. You might actually wake up and remember it, or you might not even notice it. But that mini withdrawal does happen nevertheless, and it interferes with the sleep quality you're going to get. So although it helps with falling asleep, alcohol damages the quality of sleep that you'll get and leads to nighttime awakenings. Tip number 6, practice wind down time or a bedtime ritual 1 hour before sleep. What I do to achieve this goal is 1 hour before I go to bed, I put my phone on the other side of my bedroom, put on Bluetooth headphones, turn out the lights, put on an audiobook, and set a sleep timer for 1 hour so that the audiobook shuts off at my bedtime as I'm drifting off to sleep. I don't have to get up to turn it off. In fact, often I can barely stay awake until it shuts itself off. What I was doing before this was the same bedtime ritual, listening to an audiobook, but with the cell phone in my hand, listening to the audiobook. And what I would be doing in this setup was checking my bank balance, checking the weather, browsing Amazon, looking for my next audiobook on Audible, checking my email. I was doing everything but listening to the audiobook that was playing. And before I knew it, I was lost, not knowing what was going on in the story because I was fidgeting on my smartphone and I was not able to go to sleep at my bedtime. So I realized that with the cell phone across the room, that would be the only way I'd be able to avoid using it. The only way for me to get to bed at the time I wanted to was not to be on the phone within an hour before sleep. The same may be true for you, but I highly recommend this practice. I've noticed that it's not so important what your ritual is, than that it doesn't involve looking at a screen. It might be listening to music. It might be listening to an audiobook. It might be taking a hot bath. But if it gets you on a screen and gets your mind racing, then it's not going to be helpful for getting to sleep. You need something to wind down in the hour before sleep. You can't expect your body to just turn off like a light switch. And tip number 7, use the bed for sleep and sex. Avoid eating, watching TV, or using your smartphone in bed. Avoid eating, watching TV, or using your smartphone in bed. Now this recommendation works because the body gets a cue when you use the bed just for sleep and sex, that when you get into bed, it's time to go to bed. If, on the other hand, your bed is your workplace or where you watch Netflix, then when you go into bed, your body is not going to consistently get the cue to sleep. And that makes it harder to fall asleep when you actually want to. So avoid anything that is not sleep or sex when you're in bed. Tip number 8, use a blue light filter on your phone within 2 hours of sleep. You can find this in the settings section under display and brightness, and you can turn on the night shift mode. This setting will filter out the blue light, which is particularly stimulating and makes it hard to go to sleep. Tip number 9 is wear an eye mask and earplugs. So these are the particular brands I got on Amazon. I'm not getting any kickback for them. I'm just showing you what they are. And the only reason I picked them is because they had the highest reviews and the most reviews on Amazon. But whatever is popular now is what I recommend you get. Even if you don't think it's loud or bright in your room, just putting in those earplugs and putting on that face pillow so that you're in total darkness and it's completely quiet is a totally mind-opening, incredible experience. And I find it very helpful for sleep. Tip number 10 is keep the bedroom as cool as possible. I put a thermometer right by the head of my bed. If I'm not able to sleep, I check the thermometer. If it's registered greater than 65 degrees, my goal is between 62 and 65 degrees. So if it's over 65, that's not optimal. I'll open a window, I'll turn on a fan, I'll turn on my air conditioner. I'll do whatever it takes to get the temperature to 62 to 65 degrees, which forces me under the thick blankets and is a fail-safe way of getting a good night's rest. Tip number 11, don't check your smartphone if you awake in the middle of the night or can't fall asleep. If you can't go to sleep or you wake up before you plan to, don't check your smartphone. What you're going to do in these situations is reward your subconscious for bad behavior. If you're subconsciously getting up because something's on your mind and you satisfy that itch by going online and finding out whatever you're thinking about or checking your email or something like that, you're basically giving your body an incentive to keep waking you up the next night. You're encouraging the behavior because your body will know, if I worry enough about this, I'll get an answer. I'll get to find out if that person sent me back a chat or find out if I got that work from that work email. So the point is to nip those habits in the bud by not rewarding that itch. Don't check your smartphone at night. There are no frequently asked questions for this topic. In summary, we've defined optimal sleep. We've talked about the health impact of not getting 7 hours of sleep consistently. Sleep is extremely important. It might even be the first recommendation before we even tackle psychological health. Because without sleep, it's hard to function. It's hard to set goals. It's hard to be happy. It's hard to invest in your own health and have a stable structure for continuing the progress you'll make in your health optimization journey. I hope these tips have been helpful, and I wish you a great night's sleep. I appreciate your time and attention. Thank you.